So I'm going to start recording. So I'm going to do the enemies first. And so on Tuesday, we added in the static obstacle into our Godot project. I'm just going to minimize Discord, but if you have any questions, just let me know and I'll pause. So I'm going to go to my project folder and go to project.godot and open up my game. And I'm going to make a couple changes to things. So I'm going to go to my scenes folder. And I started working on this platformer scene on Tuesday. And I added in these little obstacles. And I was playing around with this a little bit and adding some of the stuff that I forgot to add before. So I'm going to change a couple things. So one thing I want to do before I really get into adding the enemies is the tiles for the simple auto tiles are like way too big, I think. I made them like 64 by 64, but that's actually kind of like bigger than the player, so it's kind of hard for the player to get around. So I'm going to replace these, or I'm going to add like a second size to this. So I made a copy of this sprite that was half the size, so I'm going to put that in. And then I also fixed up my 3x3 auto tiles, so I'm going to put some of those in here as well. And yeah, then I'll probably add in my moving enemies. Okay, so I'm just going to do that real quick. So I'm going to go to my simple auto and click on my tile set. And I want a few more options here. So these tiles are 64 by 64. And what I want to do is I made a copy of my simple auto tiles that are 32 by 32. I'm going to put that in there. So it's the same art, but it's a little bit smaller. It's kind of blurry. I wonder why. Did I not import? Huh. I wonder why it's blurring here. That's kind of weird. Because the filter is not on. I guess I did a bad job when I resized it. I just used like the built-in Windows image thing. I should have probably used Pascal. Anyway, I'm going to ignore that for now. And so I'll go back to my simple auto tile. So I just want to have a smaller option. I think these tiles are too big. So I'm going to create an auto tile. And then once I create the auto tile, I can change my snap options. So I'm going to change this to 32 by 32. And change the subtitle size as well. And these guys are 3x3 minimum. And so now I'm going to delete this tile so I can start over, which is kind of the annoying thing with Godot. And I'll create a new auto tile and select my 3 tiles. And then I'm going to put the collision just in the middle, so my player can stand on the tile. And then I'll put the bit mask, and I want to change the bit mask to 3x3 minimal. And then I'm just going to draw a line across. So this tile gets connected to this tile, and this tile gets connected to the middle one, and the middle one is the main tile. And then the last thing I'm going to do is just select this middle tile as my icon. And I think that is going to work. So let's go back to our tiles. And so now I'm going to erase these big guys and put in a little one. And that looks good, but I need to change my snap settings. So I'm going to go up here to the toolbar and go to configure snap. And oh, it's already 32 by 32, so that's fine. Oh, so I have to go to my tile map and change my cells to 32 by 30. Okay, so now I can get rid of these big guys and use my smaller guys. And I think this makes a little bit more sense for the scale of my player and my scene. So let's put some tiles here to use. Okay, and I'm gonna go and move my obstacles in a little bit because my player couldn't really get over. Okay, so now let's try this again. So now I can much more easily jump between my tiles. And my jump is actually probably even too much. So that looks a little bit better. That's a better scale. I'm gonna turn the jump force. Actually, 400 is fine. I'll leave that as this. Okay. So the other thing that I did is I added in new animations for my player. So I'm just gonna add these real quick. So for the dies animation and the hit animation, I never actually made those before. So I'm just gonna put these in because I made these in between classes. So I'm gonna go to sprites and go to player. This one is for dies. I made a really goofy dies animation. Just 3 frames. And I don't want this to loop, and I want it to go kind of slow so we can watch the player die for a second. So I'm going to change the speed to 2 FPS. And then for the hit animation, I created another really goofy 3-frame animation. So I'm just going to throw this in here, grab those frames. And this one, I don't want to loop, but I'm not going to slow it down because the player could get hit pretty quickly. So let's go back to my platformer scene and let's see those new animations. So I'm gonna get hit. Okay, so now I have like an actual animation for when I get hit and then I die. And I forgot to fix the problem where I die after 2 lives, but I'm not gonna worry too much about that right now. Let's see, that's probably in my scene manager. I don't really know. I have to debug this later. Okay. All right, so now we want to put in our moving obstacles. And so I'm going to create a new scene for this. And I could actually duplicate my obstacle scene, but I'd have to change too much stuff. So what I'm going to do instead is just go to scenes and right click and say new scene. And so this is going to be my obstacle moving. And for this one, I'm going to use a kinematic body. So just like with the player, if I have a moving object in my scene that I want to interact with physics and colliders and things like that, I most likely want to use a kinematic body if it's going to be like moving back and forth and doing different stuff. I'm going to choose a kinematic body. I'm going to call this obstacle moving. And so I need some of the same basic stuff I have with my static obstacle. I need a collider shape. So I'm going to right click and add a child node and say collider or collision shape 2D. And then this is going to be the main collision shape for my character. So I'm going to use a circle to match the snake art. But I'm actually going to have a couple more colliders in here that are going to be doing some different things. So there's a few levels of functionality that go along with my moving enemy. So I'm going to give this particular collision shape a name. And let me double check what I want to call it. It didn't. Okay, this will be the body area. So I'm just going to call this the obstacle body. So now let's add our art. So I'm going to add another child node and add an animated sprite. And this needs some sprite frames. So I'll just go to frames in the inspector and click new sprite frames and then click on these sprite frames. And so for my obstacle, the art that I created the other day includes, or for my enemy, I have this snake. So I have an attack animation, a dying animation, an idle animation, and a walking animation. So I'll put all those in here. So I'll start with the idle, and then I have dying or dies, and attack for attacking the player, and what was the last one? Walk for walking. Okay, so for the idle animation, I'll click on my little waffle and find the enemy idle and click open. And we can zoom in a little bit. This is 2 frames by 2 frames. So I'll select those guys and add them. And so if I want to preview this, I can go to the idle animation and turn playing on. And that looks pretty good. He's just kind of wiggling around. Nothing too exciting, but that's good for my idle animation. I'm going to save that and let's do the rest of the animation. So I'll go to walk and choose enemy walk, click open. This is 1 horizontal frame and 2 vertical frames. I'll select those. And this is gonna loop because as long as the enemy is walking, we want it to loop. It looks a little goofy. I might want to slow it down a little bit, but I'm gonna look at it in the game before I do that. So then we have the attack animation. So I'll click the waffle again, find my attack animation. This is 2 by 2 again. So I'll select those 3 frames. And we can preview the attack animation. Okay, that looks pretty good. We have one more dying animation. And so I just have to find the die animation and click open and do 2 by 2 again. Oops. 2 by 2. And this one I don't want to loop. When the snake dies, we don't need to loop. So then let's take a look at the snake dying. Okay. So it doesn't loop, so that's why it stops playing. So let's go back to idle. And I want to make my collider a little bit bigger. I might have to lock the body for the animation. So let's make the collider just a little bit bigger. But I need to turn snapping off. Otherwise it's going to be too small. Okay. So that's pretty good. I want it to be not outside of the art, just like our other obstacle. I don't want it to go outside of the art because I don't want the player to be able to run into the inside of the snake. But this part of the collider is actually just going to keep the snake on the platform. So that's kind of the body collider. And so we're going to have to set up some new layers for our new collisions that we have to look for. So if I click on the main body and go to collision, so for this one, I don't want to use the obstacle attack because this main body is only going to be keeping the snake on the platform. So I'm going to change this layer. So I'm going to go to project settings, and I'm going to search for layers, or just layer, and go to 2D physics. So we have the obstacle attack. That's for both my static obstacles and my moving obstacle. So then I'll have obstacle body for the snake body. And then I'll have obstacle hit for when the player hits a moving obstacle. So the player can also destroy the moving obstacles. And you could add this to a static obstacle as well, but this is just how I'm setting it up. And then I need one more thing, which is the detect area. So one feature that you might want on your enemy is that it doesn't start moving or doing some type of action until it detects that the player is nearby. So I'm going to create an obstacle detect layer as well. So I've got 4 different layers for my obstacles, so I have to make sure to keep these in order. So for my main body, this is the kinematic body of the snake. I'm going to choose the obstacle body. And obviously I want to turn off the player. And then for the mask, the obstacle body shouldn't be interacting with the player. It should only be interacting with the tiles or platforms in the scene. Okay, so now let's add in a few more colliders. So this is what makes the moving obstacle a little bit more complicated. Actually, sorry, before we do that, we have to add in one more thing that keeps the obstacle on the ground. And if you look in the code, you'll see references to this, which is the platform check is what's called a Raycast. And the way that a Raycast works, let me do a little drawing. Open up the Epic pen. The way that a Raycast works, you can use it in a few different contexts. And so it doesn't only get used for this, but essentially what it does, let's say we have our platform here and our snake is right here. If we want to know if the snake is on the platform, what we can do is point a little arrow down here, and then the Godot engine will tell us anytime we run into something else. And so if the snake gets over here and the arrow is pointing down, if we get past this edge of a platform, we can use that as a signal and say, if it's not hitting the platform, then we need to, jump or turn around or do something like that. And so a raycast is basically like an arrow from one object in one direction, and it can tell us if we're intersecting with other objects. And that's really useful for a lot of different things that we might do with the game engine, like aiming something or throwing something. There's a lot of different uses for a raycast. So to add a raycast, I'm just going to right click on my obstacle and add a child node and type in raycast, and we'll see this raycast 2D. And it's going to be pretty big at first. We don't really need it to be that big. It doesn't actually matter if it's too big. It's better to be too big than too small, but that's a little bit too large. So I'm going to change it to just 30 pixels. And this is basically all we really need to do here. We just need to name it so it matches the code. And the code for this, I called it the platform check. So let's just rename this to platform check. And so if we have this on when we put in the script, basically it'll just check if this is intersecting with a platform. And so for this one, it doesn't have a layer, but it has a collision mask. So we can tell it we only want to be looking for tiles, not for anything else. Okay, so we've got our raycast set up. So now let's add in, we need a couple more areas. So we need our hit area. So I'm going to make an area 2D, hit create, and call this hit. And then we need a detect area. So I'm going to make another area 2D and call this detect. And I think that's everything we need. So we hit the, oh, and we need an attack area as well. Okay, sorry, we need a bunch of areas. You don't have to have this many areas. Like, you can use more simple setup, but I want to go over all the possibilities. So one more area, and this area is the attack area. So the hit area is what we'll do first. So to define where this area is, let's lock our body and our raycast so we don't move those. Let's go to the hit area, and we can add a collision shape for this. And so this is where the player can actually hit the enemy. I'm going to use a circle for this one, and I'm going to kind of place the circle. Oh, let's lock these guys up too. So I'm going to place this circle kind of around the snake's head. And so the player kind of has to hit the snake in the head for them to kill the snake. And so it doesn't have to be exactly accurate, but this is kind of the basic idea. And then for my hit area, I just want to go into the collision. And so it's on the obstacle hit area. It's not on the player area, and it can only interact with the player. So I'm only going to turn the player on for the mask. Okay, so
Professor?
Yeah.
This is for a melee weapon, or is this for a projectile weapon as well?
This is for either one. So you could set, so that's a good question. Well, let me turn on the grid. So that's a really good question. So it really could be either thing. If you had like different types of weapons, you might want to have different types of, you might need different layers for that. So if a melee weapon only hits certain parts, then that's kind of what I'm doing here, is I would create a new layer that's like melee only. But the way I'm going to do this now is it could be anything that interacts with this. So we don't have projectiles yet, but eventually, hopefully if we have time, what we can do is add projectiles, another layer for projectiles, and have that layer also collide with this hit area. So yeah, that's a good question. That's sort of like, what we're thinking about is categorizing these different types of collisions that could occur in the game.
Thank you, Professor. One other thing, you have a separate sprite for the effector you're using right now? You're making like a sword or something like that. Do you have a separate sprite for it, or is it just kind of like implied that your snake is going to punch?
I have a separate animation for it. So that animation, right now this is the idle animation, but I have an attack animation. And so that'll play if the snake gets close enough to the player. It'll switch to that attack animation. So depending on how like complicated your graphics are, you might want to have you know, separate animations for like if you have a sword or some other weaponry or something like that, you could have separate animations for those different types of items that you might have.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna set this back to idle. Okay, so we have this hit area. So the player can hit the snake. And so let's lock this up. I'm just gonna turn on the lock and the deselect. So now let's go to the, let's do the attack area next. So this is where if the snake gets, if this area interacts with the player, that means the snake is gonna hurt the player. So I'm gonna add in another collider for this. I'm gonna do a collision shape 2D. And for this one, I'm gonna do a rectangle. And so this is where you can kind of decide, let's turn off the lock here so I can play with this. So if I want my snake to only attack in front, I can put this area like in front of the snake. And so if the player gets in here, then the snake will attack. And so we might want it to be a little bit outside where this hit area is, because then we don't really want both of those things to happen at the same time. Although I guess that could happen. The player could hit the snake and get bitten by the snake at the same time. So that's if you want the snake to attack forward. Wherever this area is what will trigger the attack. But we could also have the snake attack in both directions. So it's kind of up to you what you think is more realistic, depending on what type of enemy you're using, or you know, other factors in the game. So what I'm going to do is just put this area in the front so that the player can sneak up on the snake and attack them from behind. So I'll put this area like maybe to here. So if you get too close to the snake, then the snake attacks and you're going to lose a life. I'm going to save that. So that's the attack area. And so I'm going to lock this up. And we finally have the detect area. So let's add another child node and add another collision shape. And so here's one that is a little bit like when we added our NPC. We had that big circle for where once you enter, you get the label that says, you know, interact with the NPC. This is where you can detect the player. So for this one, this again, you could put it like out here. So if the player enters here, the snake is going to start running after you. You could also put it like way over here. So either way, the snake is going to detect you. You could make it really big, so the snake could, you know, see you if you're above the snake. You could make it down here. So you can really play around with this. Anytime the player enters this area, that's going to trigger the snake to start moving. And it could trigger other things as well. It could trigger the snake to start, you know, shooting lasers at you or something like that. So that's the last area, is this detect area. So I'm going to lock this up. I think this is everything. So as I mentioned, I'm going to save a little bit of time by not going through the whole script for this. But if you have questions about the script, let me know. So instead, what I'm going to do is go to the File Explorer and go to my MMP 270 assets and go to my scripts and just find my obstacle moving script from my assets. And I'm going to copy and then go back to my game, go to scripts, and I'm gonna paste. Okay, so now I'll go to my obstacle moving, and in the inspector, go down to the bottom and go to script and go to load, go to scripts and go to obstacle moving and click open. And so you can see there's some properties in here. There's a speed value, which we can change. There's a property to make the snake either stay on the platform or not. There's a property to set the direction of the snake at the beginning, so you can have snakes facing in different directions. And then there's a property to make the snake activate when it sees the player or not. So there's a few different options we can use here with our moving obstacle. So let's go back to our platformer scene. And I'm going to click on my obstacles node, and I'm going to right click and add an instance child scene and find my new obstacle. So there's the obstacle moving. I'm going to click open. And so let's move our obstacle onto one of these platforms. I'm moving the camera, so let's lock up the player and go back to our obstacle moving. So I'm going to put a snake over here. And so one thing I want to do is connect my snake to the scene manager, just like I did with my static obstacle. In the node section over here, I have this on body enter. And so that's going to send the signal to take a life away from the player. So we need to add the same thing to our obstacle moving. So if I go to the obstacle moving, we can see, oh, we're not getting, okay. Oh, maybe we need to, let's see. Okay, so I guess we need to connect, I forget exactly. Okay, so I think the body entered connects to the actual obstacle moving script. So let's do that. So I'm back in the obstacle moving scene. Sorry about that. And I am gonna connect these signals here instead. So I'm gonna click on the attack. Let's actually just take a look at our script and maybe that'll tell us a little bit about what I'm looking for. We have the ready function, the process function, movement update. All this stuff looks like the player. So then we have the hit by player projectile. So we need to connect that to the hit area. We have the on body hit entered. Oh, okay. So yeah, this is what I need to use. On attack body entered, on detect body entered. Okay. I'm going to use all those three. So those are already written there for me. I just have to connect them. So I'm going to go to hit and go to node and body entered and connect. And there we go. So we can see that green arrow is pointing to where I want to be. So that's good. Okay. That all looks right. So let's go to the attack and double click body entered, connect it to on attack body entered. This all looks good. I think I changed something. So this is body.enemy collision, but I think I changed that to obstacle collision. So I just want to make sure that this code matches. So actually, maybe I should just use enemy collision because that's what's in the asset. So I'm just going to copy this, go to player controller and paste, and go to obstacle static and paste this here as well. I think those are the only two places that happens. So I think that's probably better for compatibility. Okay, so then detect, go to the node, go to body entered, connect, and there we go. Okay, I think all of this should work. If it doesn't, we can come back. So let's go to the platformer scene. And so with my snake up here, I'm gonna change the direction to 1, so it should face right when the game starts. I'm gonna increase the speed. 50 is probably too small, so let's do 100. And then let's turn on is moving and stay on platform. So I think this will run. Nope. Okay. Oh, I must have called this something else. Okay, so that's another thing I have to be careful about. So I think I actually just called this collider, not body. Okay, let's try it now. Oop. All right, and I'm running into the tile map, so I must have forgotten to set my collision. Yes, okay, so I forgot to set my collision layers and masks for my second two areas. So for my attack area, I need to make sure the layer is obstacle attack and not player. And it should only interact with the player, so that's fine. And then for my detect, that has to go in obstacle detect, and again, not player. And it also only interacts with the player, so that's good. A lot of little details to check. Okay, there we go. And our snake is glitching out. So we can take a look at why that's happening in a second, but let's see if the snake can be killed. Yes, so I can kill the snake, so that's nice. And the body is just sitting there, so I must have not set it up to get rid of the snake body when it dies. So let's run it again. And this time, let's see if the snake can hurt me. I'm just gonna walk up to it. Yeah, the snake can hurt me, but I also killed it. Okay, So let's see if we can figure out what the glitch is. I'm going to go to the debugger, go to errors, and what's up? Was that Sonora? No? Okay, I thought I heard something. Okay. Oh, so the first thing is not related to this. Where is this? Oh, I haven't set a default scene. Wait, is that? Oh no, I don't have an instructions path. Okay, I'm gonna ignore that for now. Let's figure out, why is my snake glitching? So, okay. Let's look at my script for the obstacle moving. Physics process. If the platform is colliding, switches direct. Okay. Let's choose my obstacle moving. I'm going to turn off stay on platform for a second and see if that works. Okay, so if I change, the snake is probably too fast. Let's turn the speed back to 50 and let's see. Okay, so if the snake does not try to stay on the platform, then it does fine. But if it does try to stay on the platform, it keeps glitching. So let's see, I'm gonna do a quick little debugging. If it doesn't work, I'll have to fix it later. So this is where the direction gets switched if the snake hits the edge of the platform. So let's just print out here, print platform check dot is colliding. Let's see what that's doing. Run our scene. So it's not colliding, so that's not what. So it should actually be colliding because it is on the ground. So let's check our collision mask again. So the collision mask is the tiles. Let's check the collision mask for the tiles. So layer is tiles. Mask. Oh, we don't have the mask for the obstacle body. So let's turn on. Although I don't think that actually matters, but let's try it anyway. And let's check the collision mask for our auto tiles here. Okay, so the layer is tiles, that's right. The mask is player. And let's also check the obstacle body. And let's see if that. Nope. Oh dear. Okay, let's go back to our platform check. So the collision mask is right. Collide with areas, maybe that's the issue. I haven't seen that before. Maybe that's a new thing. Still not going. Okay. D. Okay, so the platform check is not colliding. There's mask. Let's see. There's a right. Okay. I'm not really sure what the issue is. Mask file. Okay. Not really sure what the deal is with this. Let me Google it real quick, but we may have to just move on. Godot, Raycast, not colliding with file map. Okay, looks like other people have had this problem. Have you ensured the Raycast 2D enabled property? Okay, this is embarrassing. There's an enabled property. Okay, this is kind of like the camera current thing. So I had not actually enabled my Raycast. I guess that makes sense if you want to be able to turn the Raycast on and off. Okay, so now our snake is actually moving. So let's go up here, see if he can kill me. Okay, he got me. Oh, but now he gets stuck attacking. And then I killed him. Okay. There's a couple other issues with the code. Let's just see if I can see what those are real quick. Okay. So resume moving after act. So this is what's supposed to make the snake keep moving. Oh, I didn't connect. Oh my God. Okay. So I also have to connect my animated sprite animation finished. So we talked about this a bit on Tuesday, but for some events, once an animation is done, that's when we want something else to happen. So the last little signal I have to connect is connect my animated sprite to my animation end. So on animated sprite finished, if the snake is dead, that's when we remove the snake. So we wait for that animation to play. And if the snake was attacking, then we go back to moving. Okay, so I forgot a few details, but I think now we have a moving obstacle. So let's see. Okay, so I can kill the snake and he disappears. Okay, sweet. All right, so let's add a couple more snakes. So I'm gonna grab my obstacle moving. I'm gonna hit Command D to duplicate. I'm gonna put one up here. And then I'll put Command D, put another one here, and Command D, put another one over here. So I have some snakes, and now let's set some different settings. So for my snake guy up here, let's say activate on player detect. Same one for this guy. And then let's change the direction for this guy. Let's make him, actually one is fine. I forgot that I changed the direction for the other one. So let's reset these directions so they're facing left. And then, so another thing we can do is change the snakes so they don't stay on the platform. So with my snake guys up here, I can turn off stay on platform, and so they'll actually fall off the platform. So there's a few different ways that we can kind of interact with our obstacles. So this snake, he's already moving. I can see what he's doing, and I can get a sense of how the snake movement works. And so then when I want to go up here, I can see, okay, if I go up there and I activate that area, then the snake starts moving, but then he falls down there. So let's make the snake run into the obstacle so that he'll turn around. Whoops. So that's all we have to do for that is make the obstacles interact with each other. So I'm gonna go to the obstacle static scene and choose the area 2D, and let's just put, let's say obstacle body is part of the mask. So now the snake should run into the other obstacles. I don't know if that'll work, but let's give it a try, and then we're gonna move on. Okay, so now when this snake goes down here, kind of chased him off. Oh, no, I got a big error. Oh, right, because I get this on obstacle body entered. So that's expecting it to be the player. Okay, so let's ignore that. And we could change that later if we wanted to, but we don't have to deal with it right now. So let's just not worry about that for now. Okay. So that's how I create the obstacle moving. So there's a lot of other settings that you might want to use here. And you can also, this snake is using basic gravity. And I don't really have an option to turn that off, but you could do that like with the player. You could turn off the snake gravity if you wanted the snake just to be floating in the world. So you can see the gravity is right here. And so you could export that value. I actually wrote in a comment, export this. And you could turn the gravity off, or you could change it or something like that. But in general, these aren't private variables. They're variables. It's a better term for that. You can look through this code and see what's happening. And if you have ideas about other stuff to implement, let me know and we could go over a way to implement it. Okay, so I'm gonna pause here. I'm gonna stop recording.